The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the pristine glass windows of Meridian luxury timepieces on Rodeo Drive. It was 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the quiet hour when most of Beverly Hills elite were at their country clubs or business meetings. Marcus Chun, a veteran security guard with 15 years on the job, noticed the man first. Dressed in a simple gray t-shirt, worn jeans, and unremarkable sneakers, the customer pushed through the heavy glass door with an easy confidence that seemed at odds with his casual attire. "Another tourist," whispered Bradley Kensington III, the store's newest sales associate, adjusting his Italian silk tie. At 28, Bradley had been working at Meridian for only 3 months, but he'd already developed a keen eye for what he called browsers versus buyers. The man, tall, athletic build, wearing a Lakers cap pulled low, moved with purpose through the store. His eyes scanned the display cases with the focus of someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. "I've got this one," Bradley announced to his colleague Sarah Martinez, who was arranging a display of Patek Philippe's. "Probably just wants to take selfies with the merchandise." "Wait, before you go. If this story about Denzel Washington's incredible response moved you, touched your heart, or made you think differently about how we treat others, hit that subscribe button." Sarah, who'd been with Meridian for 8 years, glanced up. Something about the customer's bearing made her pause, but before she could speak, Bradley was already intercepting him. The store's ambience was deliberately intimidating. Marble floors that clicked under expensive shoes, crystal chandeliers that cast rainbow prisms across million-dollar watches, and the subtle scent of leather and old money. Everything about Meridian was designed to remind visitors they were in the presence of extreme luxury. "Good afternoon," Bradley said, positioning himself between the customer and the Audemars Piguet display. His tone was polite, but carried an unmistakable edge. "Are you looking for anything in particular today?" The man looked up, his dark eyes meeting Bradley's. There was a moment, just a fraction of a second, where something passed between them. Recognition? Amusement? Bradley couldn't tell. "Actually, yes," the customer replied, his voice deep and measured. "I'm interested in seeing the Royal Oak Offshore Limited Edition, the one with the ceramic bezel." Bradley's eyebrows rose slightly. The watch in question was a $285,000 piece, one of only 50 made worldwide. He gave the man another once-over. The frayed edge of his t-shirt collar, the scuffed rubber on his sneakers, the absence of any visible jewelry. "That's quite an exclusive piece," Bradley said slowly. "Perhaps I could show you something from our more accessible collection? We have some beautiful tags and tizots that might be more." "I'm familiar with the Royal Oak," the man interrupted gently. "I'd like to see it, please." Bradley's smile tightened. "Sir, I don't think you understand. That particular timepiece is $285,000. We typically require proof of funds before showing items in that price range." The entire store seemed to hold its breath. Sarah had stopped arranging watches. Marcus had subtly moved closer, his hand resting on his radio. Even the soft classical music seemed to fade into the background. The customer removed his cap, running a hand over his closely cropped hair. "Proof of funds," he repeated, as if tasting the words. "Interesting policy. It's for the security of our merchandise," Bradley explained, his tone becoming more condescending. "I'm sure you understand. Perhaps if you came back with proper documentation or—" He paused, looking pointedly at the man's attire. Dressed more appropriately for this establishment. From across the store, Sarah recognized him first. Her hand flew to her mouth, but it was too late. The scene was already in motion, like a slow-motion car crash that no one could stop. "Bradley!" she called out, her voice urgent. "Bradley, wait!" But Bradley wasn't listening. He was already gesturing toward the door. "There's a Macy's 2 blocks down. They have a nice selection of fossils and Michael Kors watches. Much more suitable for someone with your..." Budget. The word budget hung in the air like a slap. The customer, Denzel Washington, two-time Academy Award winner, star of countless blockbusters, and one of Hollywood's most respected actors, stood perfectly still. His expression remained calm, almost serene, but there was something in his eyes that made Marcus step forward instinctively. "You know what?" Denzel said quietly. "You're right. I should provide proof of funds." He reached into his pocket. Denzel Washington's hand emerged from his pocket, holding not a wallet, but his phone. The fluorescent lights above caught the screen as he unlocked it with deliberate slowness, his fingers moving with the same precision he brought to his film roles. "Bradley, was it?" Denzel asked, his voice carrying that distinctive gravitas that had made him a Hollywood legend. "Let me ask you something. In your 3 months here, Sarah mentioned you were new when I called ahead yesterday. How many sales have you made in the Royal Oak collection?" Bradley's face flushed. That's not. How did you?" "Zero," Denzel continued, scrolling through his phone. "You've sold zero because you spend more time judging customers than serving them. I know this because your colleague Sarah told me yesterday when I called to confirm you had the limited edition in stock." Sarah stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble. "Mr. Washington specifically asked to come during our quieter hours. He didn't want to cause a disruption." The color drained from Bradley's face as the name registered. His eyes darted from Sarah to the man standing before him. The Denzel Washington. The same man whose movies he'd grown up watching, whose performances had moved him to tears, whose Hollywood Walk of Fame star was just blocks away. Mr. Washington, I didn't recognize me?" Denzel finished, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That's not the problem, Bradley. I don't expect to be recognized. I do expect to be treated with the same respect you'd show anyone who walks through that door." By now, other customers in the store had noticed the commotion. A woman in designer clothing was discreetly recording with her phone. 2 businessmen had abandoned their browsing to watch the scene unfold. Denzel turned his phone screen toward Bradley. On it was his American Express Centurion Black Card account page, showing an available credit limit that made Bradley's annual salary look like pocket change. But more than that, there was a message thread with the store's owner, David Meridian himself. "David and I go way back," Denzel explained. "He custom-designed a piece for my wife's birthday last year. When I told him I was interested in the Royal Oak for my son's graduation from Stanford Medical School, he assured me his team would take excellent care of me." Marcus, the security guard, had moved closer, not out of concern for safety, but drawn by the same magnetic presence that commanded attention on movie screens worldwide. He'd seen plenty of celebrities in his years at Meridian, but there was something different about this moment. "Here's what's going to happen," Denzel said, his voice never rising above conversational level. "You're going to get the Royal Oak. We're going to complete this transaction, and then you and I are going to have a conversation about what just happened here." "Sir, I am so deeply sorry," Bradley began, his hands trembling slightly. "Don't apologize to me," Denzel interrupted. "Apologize to the next person who walks through that door wearing jeans. Apologize to every customer you've ever dismissed based on their appearance. But most importantly, apologize to yourself for letting prejudice cost you what would have been your first Royal Oak sale." Sarah had already retrieved the watch from the vault. The Royal Oak Offshore Limited Edition sat in its presentation box, the ceramic bezel catching the light like liquid obsidian. It was a masterpiece of engineering and design, worth more than most people's homes. As Denzel examined the watch with the eye of a true collector, Bradley stood frozen, watching his commission, roughly $14,000, slip away. But it wasn't the money that stung most. It was the realization of how monumentally he had failed, not just as a salesperson, but as a human being. "It's perfect," Denzel said, turning to Sarah. "I'll take it." "Sarah, I believe you'll be handling this sale. Sarah glanced at Bradley, then back at Denzel. Mr. Washington, that's very generous, but Bradley did approach you first. Store policy says. Store policy also says customers should be treated with respect regardless of appearance, Denzel countered. I checked your website. It's right there in the Meridian Promise. He pulled out his black card, the metal card making a distinctive sound as he placed it on the counter. Besides, I specifically asked for you when I called yesterday. The transaction proceeded with Sarah, but Denzel wasn't finished. As she processed the payment, he turned back to Bradley, who looked like he might be sick. You know what the real tragedy is here? Denzel asked. It's not that you didn't recognize me. It's that you looked at another human being and immediately decided their worth based on their clothes. Do you know how many of my friends in tech show up to close million-dollar deals in hoodies and sneakers? Bradley nodded mutely, his designer suit suddenly feeling like a costume he was wearing poorly. When I was your age, Denzel continued, I was turned away from a restaurant in New York, told they were fully booked, even though I could see empty tables. An hour later, I won my first Tony Award, and that same restaurant manager was at the after-party, trying to shake my hand. The store had become completely silent. Even the usual ambient sounds of Beverly Hills traffic seemed muted. The woman who had been recording was now openly filming, tears in her eyes. But here's the thing, Bradley, Denzel said, his voice softening slightly. That manager taught me something valuable that night. He taught me that how we treat people when we think nobody's watching, when we think they don't matter, that's who we really are. Sarah completed the transaction, wrapping the watch box in Meridian's signature silk cloth. As she handed it to Denzel, she whispered, Thank you for your grace in this situation, Mr. Washington. But Denzel wasn't quite done. He had one more lesson to impart. One that would change not just Bradley's day, but potentially his entire approach to life and work. Bradley, he said, holding the $250,000 watch box as casually as if it were a paperback book. I'm going to do something that you don't deserve, but that I think you need. Denzel Washington set the wrapped watch box on the counter with deliberate care. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting golden rays through the storefront windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny witnesses to the unfolding drama. Bradley, Denzel said, his voice carrying the weight of someone about to impart hard-won wisdom. I'm going to tell you something my mother told me when I was about your age, full of myself and thinking I knew how the world worked. Bradley stood transfixed, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. Around them, the store had become a theater, with customers and staff alike drawn into the moment. The woman filming had lowered her phone slightly, not wanting to intrude on what felt increasingly intimate. She said, Son, money will come and go, fame will fade, but how you treat people, that's your real legacy. That's what echoes in eternity. Denzel reached into his wallet again, this time pulling out a business card. He wrote something on the back with a Mont Blanc pen Sarah provided. I'm buying 2 watches today, he announced, causing a collective intake of breath throughout the store. The second one is for you, Bradley. What? Bradley's voice cracked. Mr. Washington, I can't. Why would you? Not a Royal Oak, Denzel clarified with a slight smile. Something more appropriate for someone starting their journey. Sarah, could you show him the Omega Seamaster? The one in the window. I believe it's about 8,000. Sarah nodded, momentarily speechless. In her 8 years at Meridian, she'd never witnessed anything like this. I don't understand, Bradley managed, his eyes glistening. I was horrible to you. I disrespected you. I don't deserve. You're right, Denzel interrupted. You don't deserve it. That's what makes it grace. But there are conditions. He handed Bradley the business card. On the back, he'd written a name and phone number. That's my foundation's youth program director, Denzel explained. You're going to volunteer there every Saturday for the next 6 months. You're going to work with kids from neighborhoods where a Tizot might as well be a Rolex. You're going to learn their stories, understand their dreams, and maybe, just maybe, you'll stop judging people by their appearances. Marcus, the security guard, found himself wiping his eyes. He'd grown up in one of those neighborhoods Denzel mentioned. He knew exactly what this moment meant. The watch, Denzel continued, you'll receive after you complete your 6 months. Think of it as a graduation present. Every time you look at it, I want you to remember this day. Not the day you insulted Denzel Washington, but the day you learned that every person who walks through any door deserves dignity. Bradley was openly crying now, his carefully constructed facade completely crumbled. I don't know what to say. Say you'll do better, Denzel replied simply. That's all any of us can promise. The actor turned to address the store, his presence commanding without effort. You know what the real luxury is? It's not these watches, beautiful as they are. It's the ability to choose grace over grievance, to teach instead of punish, to build up rather than tear down. He picked up his Royal Oak purchase and moved toward the door, then paused, turning back one final time. Oh, and Bradley, when you start volunteering, you'll meet a kid named Jerome. Brilliant young man. Wants to be an engineer. He wears the same pair of shoes every day. Not because he likes them, but because they're all he has. Remember that the next time someone walks in here wearing scuffed sneakers. As Denzel reached the door, the entire store burst into spontaneous applause. The woman who'd been filming was openly sobbing. The two businessmen stood clapping, one of them already pulling out his phone to call someone, moved to his own act of kindness. But the most profound change was in Bradley. He stood there, holding the business card like it was made of gold, his entire worldview reconstructed in the span of 20 minutes. Mr. Washington, he called out, finding his voice. Thank you. I promise I'll earn that watch. And more importantly, I'll earn the lesson. Denzel smiled, that megawatt smile that had lit up movie screens for decades. I know you will, son. That's why I'm doing it. As he pushed through the door, Sarah called out, Mr. Washington, your receipt. He waved without turning back. Keep it. Frame it if you want. Let it remind everyone here that greatness isn't about what you can afford. It's about what you can afford to give. The YouTube video, titled, You Won't Believe What Denzel Washington Did to This Rude Salesman, had garnered 47 million views. But the real story happened off-camera. Bradley completed his 6 months at the Youth Foundation, but he didn't stop there. He continued volunteering, eventually joining the board. He still works at Meridian, but now he's known as the salesman who treats everyone, from Hollywood stars to curious tourists, with equal respect and dignity. He wears his Omega Seamaster every day, and true to Denzel's prediction, each glance at it reminds him of the day he learned that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the grace we show to others. The Royal Oak? Denzel's son John David wore it at his Stanford Medical School graduation. But the story he tells most often isn't about the expensive watch. It's about the day his father turned a moment of prejudice into a masterclass in humanity. Marcus, inspired by what he witnessed, started a program training security personnel in de-escalation through empathy. Sarah was promoted to store manager, implementing new policies ensuring every customer receives equal treatment regardless of appearance. And somewhere in Los Angeles, a young man named Jerome is finishing his engineering degree at UCLA, funded by a scholarship from someone he's never met. A salesman named Bradley who learned that the most valuable investment you can make is in another human being's potential. The watches at Meridian still gleam in their cases, still cost more than most cars, still represent the pinnacle of luxury and craftsmanship. But now they share space with a framed photo near the register. A picture of Denzel Washington shaking hands with Bradley at the youth center, Both men smiling, both wearing their watches, both understanding that time is precious not because of what's on your wrist, but because of what you do with it. As Denzel said in an interview months later, when asked about the incident, "We all have moments where we can choose to condemn or educate, to destroy or build. I chose to build. Bradley chose to grow. And maybe, just maybe, someone watching that video will choose to see people, not price tags." The Meridian Promise, displayed prominently on their website, now includes a line added after that Tuesday afternoon. True luxury is treating every customer with the respect they deserve, regardless of appearance. We measure our worth not in sales, but in service to human dignity. And in a small apartment in Beverly Hills, Bradley Kensington III falls asleep each night looking at his Seamaster, knowing that he didn't just receive a watch that day. He received a second chance to become the man he was meant to be. Sometimes the most expensive lessons cost nothing but pride. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in grace. And sometimes, just sometimes, a quiet Tuesday afternoon in a luxury watch store can change lives forever.